Okay, tonight, what day is it, Joe? The 30th of November.
30th,
I'm
yeah.
Dan, this is Joe, and tonight we're going to do a video and show you how to cape out a buck. This is the buck Joe shot on Monday of this week, and that's your first buck, right, Joe?
Yep.
And so we're going to cape this thing out, and we're going to taxidermy it. And so I'm kind of an amateur taxidermist. You can see I got some bucks I've mounted on the wall, and so I'm going to show you how I do it, and we'll just walk through the process as we go. Joe had caped at a processor, and they all do it kind of different. Here, this one here's still got all 4 legs on it. If you want, we can. You set these, and you cut them. If you cut them about right here, you can use usually I use a 3/8 inch drill bit, and you can run a wood dowel in it after it dries and make a coat hanger out of it. It's real easy. Just get a nice piece of plywood to put behind it, or one by, and then they dry up like this, and you can hang your coats off it. I've made bookends with them before. You set them like this and put a piece of wood on them, and they make a nice bookend if you put a couple on there. But what we got here is the hide cape. First thing I want to do is take a couple of measurements. I'm going to measure it right here to get a good sense for the size of the form that we want to get, and then I'll show you how to cape it out, skin off the face. One of the things you don't want to do is short cape it. So when you, I'm going to cut this hide so it's easier for me to work with. And I like to cut it, well, here I got this is the whole hide. So if you want something, make a project out of the back of it, see there's the tail still on here. So if the tail's on, you can do stuff with the tail too. Yeah, you've seen, sometimes you'll take the deer tail. I don't know if it's still on here. Yeah, see, here's the tail. And there's projects you can do with the tail as well. Here's the tail. But in the meantime, I'm just going to kind of cut this, make sure I cut it far enough down. And a good measure is that on any of these mounts, and if you look up on the wall, you see these mounts on the wall, see that little tuft of hair down there? You want to make sure that you get it cut. It's a little bit south of there, because you got to wrap it around the back of the form. So, that can be a good measurement. If you look for that little tuft of hair before the front legs, you want to make sure you cut it behind that. And so on this deer, you can see, wherever that tuft of hair is, I'm going to dig around for it. It's going to be right here, probably up right here at the legs. So this is actually where, so that's what they left me to work with. So hopefully I got enough here to get wrapped around the form. Then I'll just cut the back of it right there. We'll set this off to the side, and then we'll make this side cut now. So we got the buck laid back this way. And since this is always, like we said earlier, sort of the base of the mount, if you pull it tight this way, on the back you can see the bullet holes. Looks like you shot this guy a couple times, eh, Joe?
Yep.
Here and here, good shots. So I'm gonna cut it here. And then that way I know I'm not gonna shortcut this. The worst thing you could do is shortcut a deer. It's gonna make it hard for the taxidermist, and the point of this video is to get you to where you can cape it yourself, and then be confident when you take it to the taxidermist. Measurement I like to take. In the taxidermy catalogs, you measure them from the inside of the hide, but I just like to do this to get a baseline. You see, I'm not too tight, just, it's around here. But if I pull it tight, I can get all the way down to probably 19.5. If I keep it loose, that's 20 or 20.25. So Joe, would you just go ahead and mark down here that let's make it like 20 even. Let's call it 20 even on the outside. Next thing we're gonna do is, I'm gonna cut along the back. I wanna cut nice and even. What has to happen is that we have to take the meat that's at the base of the neck, and we have to be able to have a cut that goes far enough so that when we start to cut here, we can get it around the antlers. So that's the trick. You don't want to go, the further back you go, the more stitches you have to put in it when you start to taxidermy it. And if I can not cut it all the way back, I try to avoid that. So what I'm going to do is start with a cut, right in here, and then I'm going to cut it right down here, right down the back, and you want it to be dead center. Because what you don't want to do is have the seam showing up on the sides of it when you stitch it together, and you can see it when you're looking at, when you're looking at the mount. I made that mistake before. You want the seam so it's in the back, nice and hidden. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so are we going? Okay, yeah. So I'm just gonna show you here now. I've got a cut in the back, and it's nice and even in the back. I may end up having to cut more, and I have to be very careful as I cut more because it's really easy. See, I got a little off. So I'm gonna have to kind of correct as I work my way back here. Ideally, when I go to cut it further, I lay it down, I get the hide so it's draped down, it's a little bit more open, and I can make sure that cut continues to be good. But let me show you up here as I get up towards the antlers. I try to stay back a little bit and then cut behind it. And so I got an angle going here to the back of the antler, one going over here to the back of the antler, and then I'm gonna work around the antler. And then the next problem we have to work around is the ear. And the ears can kind of screw you up. You can see I'm getting you the hide right here. And so I can't skin back. Pretty soon when I start getting around to the other side, you can kind of see the muscle formation around the ear, back in this area, you know, and around here. And so I'm gonna kind of skin up my way. And as I work my way here, I try to get so, you know, I'm not taking a lot of meat with me. See, we got a little meat here, so I'm gonna try to work that off and then peel it back, see? And then you can see there's like this little tissue here. If you aim for that tissue, then you're gonna get it a little cleaner. You wanna avoid having to flesh any more off than is necessary. Okay, here's a good shot of it. You can see that little tissue right here. If you aim for that tissue, you're gonna get it nice and clean. See how there's no meat on the back of that hide. So I'm gonna just continue to work around here to the ear. And I'm starting now to get so it's gonna cut through. And you'll see where this is gonna happen. Right here, it's kind of soft cartilage tissue. And the second I'm gonna poke through, and you'll be able to see the hole, the ear hole from this side. See, I'm working as close to the skull, and now I'm starting to open up the ear canal. And what you don't want to do is poke through the other side. And so continue to open this up. All this hide's got to come back anyway to get on the other side of the ear hole. And now it'll take me right up here to start working this, and I'll get that in a second. Okay, so now you can see I'm cutting that ear. Now I'm opening it up. There's the cartilage, and here's the ear hole, the ear canal. And so I want to manage the rest of it from the other side. And so I'll come back to the video in just a second when I flip it over and I start working my way around the neck to the other side. Because eventually what you have to do is turn these ears inside out. And so you want this little bit of ear meat still attached to it when it comes time to taxidermy it, because you're going to have to stick a little plastic form in here. And so I'm almost through to the other side. I'll flip it over and get it in just a second. So this is the next move. I'm still gonna work around the ears, but this is just another good move. Especially if you got a buck. If you got a buck, you can lean it forward like this, you know, resting on its nose and its antlers. It puts you in a nice position. You can kind of use the weight now of the hide to separate it as you work down. You know, because eventually what we're gonna do is just peel the skin right off the face of this deer. And so, you know, but this is a good angle to get this done. And of course, you know, with some good meat. Here's the esophagus right there. It almost kind of looks like one of those wheels you would spin around when you were a kid and it would make a humming sound. And I think this right here is actually, what's that called? You breathe through? The air hole? Trachea? Maybe. It's the trachea? Yeah, this is the deer's trachea. Right here. Pretty cool. All right. We'll be back in a second on the ears. Another kind of technical piece. This is another kind of technical piece of it. You can see up in here. Now, what I'm trying to do is get my knife as far up in here as I can, because what I want to have, you see this is a legally tagged deer in Ohio. I got to work my way around here and cut the hide free and have as much hide on it as I can, because when it comes time to wrap this hide around the form, and of course I'm going to be using these exact same antlers, I don't want any gaps. And so you just got to poke your knife. I've seen guys stick screwdrivers in here and use it with screwdrivers, but a lot of times when you do it that way, you'll end up ripping it. And so I'm just real careful when I do this. And that's all you got to do too. You just keep checking this top side and make sure you're under this. See, this is almost like a little tree right here. And so make sure you're kind of getting tight in there. Now, a professional taxidermist might give me grief for this, but I'm an amateur. This is an amateur video, but you see, I'm being very careful of that seam. Feeding my knife right up in here, nice and easy. You know, and this way I got maximum hide left, and that's starting to break it loose. Come at it from this side, and you just kind of got to rip away at it. So it's very tedious, but I just want to say be careful as you do this. Take your time, and you'll be just fine. You got to stay up nice and tight right here. There we go, see, I'm getting some movement. Stop it.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm back on the other ear here, and Joe and I were just talking. You can kind of see as I cut here about, Joe, you're a brown belt, Joe, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's where I met Joe, training Jiu-Jitsu at Top Level Martial Arts in Akron, Ohio. That's where we're at right now. We're in Akron, and so Joe's been a teacher and a friend to me for a number of years. I think it's been probably about 6 or 7 years. I'm still a blue belt, but Joe's knocking on his black belt, and our school's a member of what, Joe?
Pedro Sauer.
So it's the Pedro Sauer Association. Where are they headquartered, Joe?
Of Virginia.
Isn't it like in Sterling or something like that?
Yeah,
Sterling, Virginia. So any correlations, Joe, between this is your first buck? Any correlations between your experience in jiu-jitsu and in bow hunting for the first time, or firearms hunting, I guess?
They are both tough. As in, they're both simple, but they're not easy.
Simple but not easy.
Yeah.
I know for me, in my case, when I first started training martial arts, I started taking my son to Taekwondo lessons, and he ended up stopping, and I stayed interested in it until I finally earned a black belt in that. But I started dropping in on jiu-jitsu classes on a Saturday, and got interested in it. I got my black belt in Taekwondo, wore the black belt the night that it was awarded to me, and I haven't had it on since. I found Top Level and started training. That's where I met Joe right after that, and we've been training together ever since. Joe, you were a blue belt at the time, so it just shows you how long I've not progressed, how little I've progressed, and how much you have since then.
Busy man, though.
So, but jiu-jitsu is a big part of Joel's life and my life, and hunting and jiu-jitsu are, and I think about like this art of manliness. It's a podcast I've listened to a lot, and I think a lot of young people are looking for ways that they can, young men, even women too, about ways that they can go out and prove themselves to themselves and develop self-discipline and develop, just skills, be out in the outdoors and test themselves. And I think jiu-jitsu and hunting are both great things. Joe Rogan, of course, he took up hunting,
Yep.
And so Joe Rogan's into it a little bit. And, these things, you mentioned it being hard. It's like John Kennedy says, like, you put why does rice play Texas? Because it's hard. And some of the things that are best for us in life are the things that are hard for us to do. So you can see while we're talking here, I finished that ear, and I got it so real nice, and I'll just show you for the video, and I'll do it on this side for your viewing pleasure. I will poke a hole in this with my leather punch, and I'll poke a hole right here too. You can see the tip right there where they meet. I'll poke a hole there, and I'll take a string, piece of taxidermy thread, and I'll tie it together. Then I'll tie this side together, and you can see the ears will come right into form, and that's what I'll begin my stitching in the back. And I got it up so it's nice and tight right there, and you won't even be able to tell. These antlers will be mounted on the form. And so now it's just a matter of working our way down, finishing the ears, and then we'll go through and I'll show you how to deal with the eyes and the mouth. Okay, so just showing you the ear. I cut very carefully until I started getting down towards here, but this is where you gotta just like take your knife, get close to the skull, get as much hide around the ear as you can, and just start cutting. And as you cut, you'll find yourself on the other side. See, if I put my fingers right here, I'm on the back side of the ear. And then when I flip it over, I can still feel my fingers, just like when you're grabbing a gi, back to that jiu-jitsu conversation. And I just keep pulling it forward here. Now I'm gonna have to deal with this meat when I get to the other side of this project, because I'm gonna have to, get as much of that off as I can when it comes time to do the taxidermy itself. Now, I'm getting real close to the eye hole here, and that's the next technical part. The inside of this eye has got, you see its eye, the tissue here that connects this. It's that eyelid. See that eyelid right there? Just like a person's eyelid. And so that gathers up on this side. And so as I cut my way up towards that eye, see the skull starting to build for the eye socket. So that would be what the orbital bone. And then now right here is where it's beginning to get exposed. And it's right there at the orbital bone. And I just start cutting and pulling. And this is where you can screw up and damage the eyelid itself, and that will screw up the look of the deer. So this is a technical thing you want to do very carefully. I'm working my way down. I'll stick my finger and stick it inside the eye socket. It's a little gross, so you just kind of got to get through it. But I can tell, I got to go soft and easy and I'll cut my finger. But now I can take my knife and I know I'm almost through. And I get up as high as I can. Now this tissue, all this tissue here, I'm gonna have to deal with when I do my taxidermy piece of it. But I'm getting as much of it up as I can. And in a second, you're gonna be able to see that eye. I cut very carefully, watching out for my finger. And here, see, I broke through. And on the other side of this is the deer's eye. There it is. See, so that's the process. So you just got to work your way very carefully around the remainder of it. But see here, I didn't cut the eye, so the eyelid is still nicely intact, but yet I can take my finger and poke it through to the hole that I just made. And I can kind of use that a little bit to pull up and make the remainder of the cuts.
There we are.
All right, so we're just getting through the eyes now, and so I just wanted to show you, here's the tear duct. And so this tear duct is the last step of the eye. So I'll peel it back and I'll show you where we're at. Got the eye separated, and now to deal with the tear duct, I got to keep cutting around here, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the, I just take my knife. You can never go wrong if you stay close to the skull. And so I just keep digging it in here until it breaks loose, and then you'll see the hole for the tear duct here in just a second when I finally get to it. These muscles here, see this muscle group right here? This is the beginning of the jaw. This is the jaw muscle. And so when I start digging up into here, I'm gonna start making some cuts that keep me close to the teeth as we start working our way around here. We want this to be clean. This is really easy to cut with your knife. You create all kinds of problems for you dealing with this. Interesting, very interesting, these things here. You know, I don't know what they're called, but you know, they're very interesting. There's a whole bunch of them, and you'll see them in here. Those little things, little lobes that stick out right there. There's a whole bunch of them on the inside. Like I feel a ton of them with my thumb right there. And actually when I stick my thumb, it's like my thumb is all the way up here right now. And when I pull this back, see where I'm at, that's the tip of my finger. So I'm already in the mouth cavity. And so like I can cut right here and know that I'm in the mouth cavity. And that will give me a guide. In fact, you can see right here on this side, see, these are those same lobes. So we know we're in the mouth cavity, and that gives me my guide to cut right here. Because that way I separate the hide right here in the jaw area and take as much as I can right here of this meat. See? Now we just completed the loop. And as we work down, we can just continue to skin this whole thing right here. And we'll just stay nice and tight. Right here, finish right here on the tear duct area. And that's the last step in the whole process. From here, you just continue this cut until we get to the nose. I'll show you that at the very end. So we just finished pulling the cape off, and I didn't get every detail. I don't want this video to be forever long. But this is the cape. And so you can see we got it nice and clean. This is where the nose came off. One principle to follow throughout this, I mentioned it earlier, is when you're cutting around here, the closer you stay to the skull, the better off you are. And so you just kind of have to be feeling with your knife. You're not gonna be able to cut through the bone. So, you know, it's good. Every time there's these openings, you know, you're gonna have to work through it. Now, when you buy the form is gonna come in a piece of plastic. It's gonna look like this. The eyes are gonna be set and everything in it. And then, you know, there's some work on the form. We can do another video on that. But let me show you. This is pretty cool. So I'm going to take, now this is kind of what it's going to look like. We'll have the antlers mounted to the form. And so essentially what you're doing is taking a piece of styrofoam and repeating this process. So we're just going to take it and stick the hide back on the animal. And so this is essentially, you know, a deer with its skin on. And then so you can still see, you know, its eyes are kind of screwed up here a little bit, but you know, that's the basic principle. And you know, you set the ears and then you got a deer, and you're just gonna take the decomposing piece, the meat in the skull, and replace it with a plastic form. Now, you can see this is what's remaining. You can see some more of that interesting flesh around the mouth. And I only screwed it up one time, you know, on this, and I poked a little. Actually, that's the tear duct. I got a hole somewhere here by the ear. The ear hole I'm gonna have to sew, but this is the only one that I made, and so I'm an amateur. I'm sure a pro would probably do the whole process better and maybe differently. But this is gonna work out just fine. So now we're ready to flesh this thing out. Now, actually, real quick, let's take a measurement. Would you stop that video? Start, and go ahead and start. Okay, so now we're gonna take a measurement here. And what I always do is like, okay, so the measurement we got with the hide, on the outside of the hide was, I think, 20.5 inches. This is gonna be shorter. But yeah, I get right behind, I like to get right behind the ears. So you can see where it kind of spreads out. And you know, you can kind of feel where it kind of transitions towards neck in here. It's gonna be about the same measurement. And so now I like the neck's big. And so this is a pretty good buck Joe's got here, nice Ohio 8-point. And so when I pull that hide tight and I stretch the thing across it, I get 20 inches. And now that's pulling it tight. Just to be conservative, if we wanted to go at a 19-inch form, we know we'd have, you know, an inch to work with some shrinkage. You don't want to put too much pressure on your stitches. But, you know, I think maybe we look, Joe, for like a 19.5-inch form. And that way it'll be, you know, I like those necks as big as possible. And that's actually going to look real good.